Welcome to this skill session. A skill session is our custom webinar format for our communities at Gerlent, German talent, and Glolent, global talent. More info on gerlent.com and glolent.com. Enjoy.
So we're ready to go. So thanks again for joining, guys, and thanks again for giving the session about ReactJS and NodeJS. Short introduction, since we want to keep this session as concise and as informative as possible. We do it in 20-minute session bit and a 10-minute question bit afterwards. And Lukas is going to try to introduce ReactJS, famous Facebook developed front-end framework that took off the last years, and Node.js, the backend framework, JavaScript framework, to people that have some knowledge in programming but are not experts on this issue and not experts on this framework. So I'm really interested, and yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself, Lukas. Thanks again for doing this for our community.
All right, thank you. Yeah, my name is Lukas. I am from Berlin. Actually, I live in Berlin. I'm not from here. And I work in tech, in development, design, stuff like that. And I have about 4 or 5 years experience with Node.js and ReactJS. So pretty much when React came out, and I did the whole story with React. Yeah, so let's have a look at Node.js and React. We're going to start with Node.js. I'm going to explain a little bit what it is and so on. I'm going to do the same thing for React, but a bit later on. Yeah, and since we only have 20 minutes, it's going to be a really short introduction. It's going to show, we're going to show a little bit how it works inside of the code, but I'm also going to cover a bit of the basics just in theory. But yeah, hopefully you will understand what the two things are used for and maybe get a kickstart for your own development. Also, I'm gonna share a GitHub repository afterwards, so you can just use that and play around a bit with it if you want to. Okay, so as I said, let's start with Node.js. So what is Node.js? Node.js is basically a JavaScript runtime for your local machine or a server. Back in the day, JavaScript started out as normal browser or just browser runtime. So you would have HTML files requiring JavaScript files, and then you would do something on your web page. At some point, there was an idea to bring that to your computer actually, and this is really nice. Why? Because then you would have to the tools to do both sides, both the front end and the back end with just JavaScript. And because of that, I also highly recommend to use these tools, because you just learn JavaScript and you're able to do anything you want. Basically, you can build mobile apps, you can build desktop apps, you can build servers, and of course front-end apps, for example, with React. Okay, so what do we need to do to get Node running? The first thing is you have to install it. So you can just Google Node.js. You're going to find the website. Just go in there and then download it. I obviously have it installed already, but this is what you have to do if you're new to Node.js. And then to check if it's actually working, go to a terminal, and then you should be able to go node-version, sorry, and then you should get your version of Node.js. Yeah, if there's no version, then something went wrong and you have to kind of check what is wrong. But we're set up so we can start. So as I said, we can run any JavaScript on our machine. I have a little setup here already. I'm going to explain that in more detail later on. But let's just see and create a JavaScript file here, maybe hello.javascript, right? .js. So here we can do whatever. Let's just log something, and I think pretty popular thing to do is to just log hello world, right? So how do we run that? We go node and then the name of our file, which is hello.js, and this will print hello world or whatever we put in there, right? And then we can give more instructions in this file. And this is our very first Node.js program. Now, this is very simple, and here we can't really do anything that is of much use. So what we normally do is we build a web server, and this is exactly what we're going to do here. And we're going to use that web server actually to serve our React app later on. Okay, so I have a little project set up, as I said. I'm going to run you through it real quick. So there's a couple of things. Git, if you're familiar with programming, you should know what Git is. And then we have these two package files. This is node specific. Actually, these are the packages. So you can install external packages with Node.js and then use them in your project. And this file just says there's some metadata about your project and then what packages you use in your project. Right now, I have a couple installed, and we're going to run through them. As you can see, I also have React installed already, which we're going to use later. Okay, so yeah, and how do you install packages? You can use the command npm, which stands for Node Package Manager, and install any package. For example, React. This is going to save it to your directory. Okay, and then there's also the website, which is npmjs.com, and there you can look for any kind of packages. All right, so now, as I said, we're going to try to build a web server to serve our React app. First, we're going to take a couple of steps and just test if it works, and then later we're going to serve our React app with that. Okay, so I have just a source folder to keep things clean a little bit, and there I have a server folder, right? And here is an index found. Everything is happening in here at the moment. So let's go through that, right? We have three packages what we use at the top of our file. The first one is Express, and this is the most important one for us right now. The other two are just for some configuration stuff. We don't really need to know what they are at the moment. But Express is a package to really easily build web servers with Node.js. You can also Google it for all of the documentation. I think it's the most popular framework for building web servers with Node.js. And yeah, it's really, really easy to use them. Okay, so let's not think about these two at the moment. Now, how do we actually create our first server? So we plug in Express, we make an instance of it, and then there comes something in between, and then we just tell Express to listen on the port 3000, right? And by default, it runs on your local machine, right? So it's accessible through localhost. Okay, now let's test that. We're gonna just run. Remember, as I said, we run local JavaScript files with the command node, and then the file we want to run. I'm currently in the source directory or in the root directory, so I have to go into source, server, and then index.js. All right, and there, as you can see, the server or my terminal is kind of like busy because the server is still running, right? I didn't end it or anything like that, so it's running. But right now, it's not really doing anything. It's listening on a localhost 3000, and we can check that to make our first request to our server when we type localhost 3000, all right? And there, Express, this is the default configuration, just says, okay, there is no configuration for the root route, so there's an error, basically. So let's try to change that, right? So as I said, we kind of have to put, and maybe you've seen that here already, you kind of have to put your configuration in between these two, in between of creating the instance and then telling the server to listen on a specific port. Now, how are we going to do that? There's different methods, HTTP methods. Hopefully you're familiar with that. But basically there's get methods, what we do, for example, in the browser. There's post, put, patch, and so on. Right now, we're just going to focus on the get method. So let's see, and yeah, maybe you've seen that. This is how we actually specify a get route for our server, which is in the form of server.get, and then we specify the route, right? So here in that case, it's just the root route, and then we pass a function to the configuration, which has two parameters. Maybe I'm going to type that out, and these stand for request and response. So by default, Express gives you two objects, which is request and response, where you can do certain stuff. If you want to know more about what you can do with all that, you can check out the Express documentation. Just Google it and you'll find it. But yeah, there's different metadata. Right now, we're just going to use a response method, a response object, sorry. We're just going to send something back to our client, right? And we can maybe just use the same hello world string as we used before. So we can say response.send, and here I get the auto suggestion. And I can send anything, as you can see here. I can send a buffer, I can send an object, I can even send HTML. I can send also a status code, which is a bit more advanced. But let's just stick to a normal string, right? So here we say hello world. When we access the server on the root route, we're just sending hello world, okay? So let's try if that works. And here, disclaimer, it's not going to be working. I'm going to tell you why in a second. So if I try to reload the page, I still get this same error message, let's say. Why is that? Because our terminal still, or our computer still has the old program in memory. So what we have to do is we have to kill it, and then we have to run it again, okay? And then, okay, it's running again. Now if I try it, I get hello world. Perfect. So this is our very first, very, very basic NodeJS server. Here I'm going to introduce a little tool, which is called NodeMon, which will basically watch for your files and then restart the server if you made any changes to that file. Okay, so you can go NodeMon after you installed it. You can install it with npm install NodeMon, right? But I did that already. So you can just go NodeMon source server index.js. There we go. And then you get some output that the server is actually running. Perfect. So we can test that again. Still working the same. And then maybe if I want to say something else, we're going to just say here, Gerlent community, maybe. All right. And then as you saw here, the server restarted. And then when I actually reload the page and make a new request, I get the new response. So that's working perfectly fine. Now let me see. Okay, so let's try the React app now. Or let's make a step in between maybe. We have that index HTML here, which I prepared, which is basically just an empty index HTML, empty HTML file where we require a JavaScript file. And this is front-end JavaScript, right? Remember, the Node.js is the backend JavaScript, and here we're doing traditional JavaScript, let's say, in the front end. Okay, here, I also prepared something for React, but let's not worry about that right now. So let's just see how we can serve that index HTML from our server. okay? So that we maybe put an H1 on our page. Hopefully you're a bit familiar with HTML, so you know what's going on. So we're gonna say the same thing. All right, so we wanna send that file. Okay, let's go back to our server here. And here you can see I prepared that. We don't have to send everything as a string. We can also send the whole file, right? So let's delete that. I'm just going to use that. Here, I'm going to put app. We need the public later for our React app. Let's just use that at the moment. Okay, so whenever and this here is also new, this basically says for any request, for any GET request, do what is in here, right? So it's not just our root route. We could also say, okay, just on our root route, for example, or when we access /Gerlent, then do the following. But right now, I just want to have the same behavior for all of the different routes. Okay, so let's try that out if that works. So expected behavior is if we go to any route, we should end up with the index HTML, which we have here. All right, good. So let's see that. There is no such file. This is not good. Let me go up one. There we go. All right. So that's perfectly fine. We don't have to kind of manually read the file, the index HTML. We can just give the path, and then Express is going to take care of the rest. Okay, now let's go over to the React app. Since we're sending our index HTML, and then in succession we're gonna render something on the page with React. Let's talk about what React is at first, and then look at the code in a bit more detail. So back in the day, you had HTML files and maybe JavaScript files, or maybe render something from your server directly. So you would send a request, for example, /Gerlent, and then get a specific HTML page in return. Nowadays, what we can do is we have just always one HTML file, and then the JavaScript is taking care of all the rest. So you can make a really dynamic, it's called single page application with React. So you have a lot of functionality in your JavaScript, which you can use and dynamically render stuff on your page, in your web browser. So I'm gonna go back to the original configuration. It would be like a bit more configuration to make it production ready, or to explain it, what this is. But as I said, I did this setup already, and I can start the React app. If you're interested, as I said, you can just clone the GitHub repository and then get going. Sorry. Okay. Now to be able to use React, you need a bundler. Maybe you've heard of Webpack. I personally like to use Parcel. This is just a keyword to, if you're interested, you can make some more research. But I set it up already, and then we can just use that. Okay, let's see. I'm going to start the server, and then I'm also going to start the bundler, which kind of bundles everything from our React app into one file and puts it in our public folder here. Now, we do have a problem. We're going to have a look at that in a second. Okay, so here in our index HTML, we're going to not have anything on our page because we're going to do that with React, and just reference the JavaScript file. So from now on, we're not going to work in HTML. We're just going to work in our index.js here in the app. And here as well, I prepared something, which is a bare bone React structure. There's a little bit of a different syntax here for requiring external modules. But yeah, basically we need React and React DOM. You don't have to worry about that at the moment too much. React is what really is the core functionality at the moment. And React consists of a whole bunch of smaller or bigger components. And here I prepared our first component, which is a class at the moment in React syntax. I just call it application, which is kind of the standard. And then it extends a React component. And this gives you predefined functionality, which you can then use. All right, inside our class, what we do is we need a render function. And then in that function, we need to return some stuff. So everything what you return from that function will get rendered on the page, right? So let's have maybe there as well, hello from our first React app. Great. So here, this just says, okay, put it on the page. Let's now see if it is there. Okay, we have, let me just clean it up real quick. There we go. All right, here we're serving our app through our Node server. And then we're through our application, let's go back here. Through our application, we're just rendering a div with the header on our page, right? And then we can put more stuff on the page. Maybe a paragraph, whatever you want. This is great. Very good. And then it's going to end up on our page. Perfect. So it's working perfectly fine. Now, you might think, okay, this is not really like more advanced than static HTML. So I could just use an HTML file, and you're perfectly right. But this is not what React is used for. React is used for more dynamic pages. So let's try to make the page or the application, our application, a bit more dynamic. So we're going to retrieve some data from the backend, from our NodeJS backend, and then send it to the front end, to our React application, and then put it on the page, render it on the page. So we're going to somehow put it in here. Now, let's prepare the backend so we can send some data. So let's go back to our server here, right? And then we need a new route. Let's say server.get. When we access the route, maybe Gerlent, and then request response here. This is always the same schema here. It's always the route and then the route handler, basically. Now here, as I said, we can send something back, and here maybe we're just going to send an array of objects, right? Let's say name. Just going to put my name here, maybe a website. Okay, this is the first, this is like the attendees maybe. There we go. Okay, hopefully that is correct. Let me just check that. No, this is not correct. Oh, I saw that. Okay. Perfect. So I do have the route prepared. Oh, that's response. I do have the route prepared. Now let's test if that works, and then we're going to proceed to actually use that in our front end. Okay, so I'm going to go to that route in my browser. Remember, it's a get route. And then I should get in return the attendees. I think there's more in the call, but I don't know your names. Yeah, so we're receiving the attendees here, just some fake sample data, right? And now maybe we want to request that endpoint in our React app and then put it on the page, okay? So we prepare the endpoint and then we can use it in our app. All right, now let's see how we do that. So there's a thing called state in React, which is basically data that can change throughout the application's life, let's say. So maybe when a person clicks a button, right, then we want to fetch the data, fetch attendees, and then put it in our state. And then React is going to take care of all the stuff that is required to actually display it on the page. Okay, so let's see if we have a button. Okay, we have the button, but when we click on it, there's actually nothing happening. Okay, so let's see how we can change that. How you define state is in the constructor. There's a little bit of a structure which you have to follow, but you can set this.state, which is then an object, and then you can define anything. Maybe attendees, and here just going to put an empty array, because on page load we're not going to have any data, right? We wanted to trigger it when we click on the button. So at first render, then we're not going to have any attendees. It's going to be an empty array, and then later it's going to be filled with something. Then, okay, let's create a function to actually fetch the data. Okay, so we're going to say fetch data is, and then we're going to say fetch / Gerlent, I think it was. Then response not 100% sure. I think it was like that. Response basically just makes an HTTP request. Fetch makes an HTTP request to anything, and here we say stay on our server and just request that route. I have to kind of check because I forgot the exact syntax. I have to check in the browser what it is. Oh, okay, but let me see here. One thing we forgot is we just have that declared. We kind of have to connect that to a button. In normal JavaScript, you would have an event listener, and then you would have to remove the event listener whenever you remove the button from the page. Here, React does everything for you. You just have to kind of pass a function as on click. This is called props in React, but this again is a bit more complicated. So here we say this dot fetch data, and then we have to also bind it. Here you don't really have to understand what this is. You can just, like this, you always have to do in React. Okay, let's see. So we connected our function here that fetches the data to our button, right? When we click on it, let's see if that works. It's not going to work that much. There we go. Okay, sorry, I have to check that real quick. Normally I'm using something else. Okay, there we go. Okay, perfect. So here's our console. I'm just logging it right now, right? This says, go to the server and to the route Gerlent, and then log what we get in return, okay? So when we click on the button, it makes a new request to our server answers, and then we get this stuff here, right? What we declared earlier. And this would, in a real application, would probably be from a database or something like that. But here it's just our fake data, right? So we have the name and the website. Now let's put that in our state and see how React puts that on the page, okay? So we're gonna say this set state. This is a predefined function from React. And then we say attendees is results. Oh, there we go. Now, then we're expecting it to be in our state, but it's still not in on our page, so we don't have it in here. So let's make a list maybe with the name and the website each. So we're gonna have a list, and then for all of this, the attendees, we're gonna return a list element, list item. And here, this might be a bit weird for you. This is called JSX, where you can actually put JavaScript in your HTML. And then in that JavaScript, you can put more HTML, return new HTML. You can kind of mix and match your HTML and JavaScript, which might seem a bit confusing at first, but actually gives you a lot of power later on. So here we're gonna return a list item, and then maybe just the name, element of name, and then the, well, let's give it an anchor, why not? So we can actually see that element of website. Okay, and then go to the website, something like that. Okay, so now we connected our state, the attendees, to our page somehow, right? To the rendering of our page here. This is called render for a reason, right? Because this is going to render everything what you put in here on your page. Okay, so let's have a look if that actually works. So I'm going to fetch my attendees, and it doesn't work. Let me see why that doesn't work. Oh, there it is. I have a typo in here. Perfect. Good. So on first page load, I don't have any attendees, right? And then as soon as I click the button, I make a request to the server. The server answers with currently fake data, and then we put it in our state in React. And then this, since we declared it in React, as soon as there is some attendees, some state, React is going to re-render the elements and actually put them on the page. So let's try that again. Perfect. And then I can go to the websites if I want. And this is how you build a very, very basic React application and make your page dynamic. And here, you might be able to do that with normal JavaScript on an HTML page, but if your application gets bigger, React is very, very good at handling that, and you can make subcomponents and so on and split it up really, really nicely. Okay, I think we're a bit over time, so I'm gonna stop here, and I'm very happy to answer your questions.
All right, thanks, Lukas. It was very interesting to see like a basic application from zero to finish. And Yeah, I'm sure this is just like any other framework. It shows its real power when you have more complex scenarios. Then you can't just JavaScript your way out of it with plain old JavaScript. But thanks again for holding this session. If you have any questions, guys, go ahead. If not, I have some questions for sure. So yeah, don't be shy. And let's start the question round.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you for your introduction to ReactJS and Node. I'm learning a little bit of ReactJS, and I have a question about the security aspect. We don't care about security with ReactJS because it's a front-end framework, so we cannot avoid an attacker or something like that doing whatever he wants from the front end, right? There is nothing, it's just JavaScript, so there is no security aspect in ReactJS.
Yes and no. So it is a front-end application, so you can change that just in your browser, right? If you go to google.com and you open the console, you can do anything with that page, and accordingly you can do anything with any other page. So there's no real prevention for security issues here. So definitely make sure that you don't leak any credentials into your front-end app, at least none that really can do harm to your application. And the real security prevention happens in the backend. As with every application or with every server, you have to secure your backend, right? But it does get a bit tricky to actually change something, because with these bigger applications or to exploit a security vulnerability is because as these apps get a bit bigger, when you check the source here, it's not uglified. Maybe I can show you that right now. So what they do is they take all these files, and since you have so many, because it's a single page application, right? Everything is like kind of ends up in one file. You uglify it. That's what it's called, and then you're not really able to see what is being done on the page. But as I said, theoretically, you could do anything with that. So you have to be sure. You have to make sure that nothing sensitive gets leaked into your front-end application, and the real security or fraud prevention, whatever you want to do, is in the backend actually. So let's see if I can show you that real quick. It's going to take like 10 seconds. There we go. Okay, yeah, here. This, as you can see, looks definitely a bit different than what your normal JavaScript file would look like. And it's definitely harder to do something in there than in traditional HTML and JavaScript files.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is it any slower to perform obfuscated JavaScript code by the browser, or?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Is it any slower to execute it in the browser, obfuscated code versus non-obfuscated code?
Obfuscated, you mean these like uglified code here?
Oh yeah, uglified.
Yeah. No, I actually think, I'm not sure, but I think it's faster because this is really marginally faster or slower. Actually, no, because you reduce the bundle size, and for the compiler, I think, or for the runtime, it doesn't really matter if it's spaces or a character or 5 characters. It just reads the file. Right, and since the bundle size, the character amount is condensed or reduced, then it should be faster. It is definitely faster, but the real thing is the page load time. So if you reduce your bundle size, it takes not as long to load the file. The actual reading of the file doesn't really make sense.
Okay. All right.
That doesn't make a difference, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's marginal anyhow.
Yeah.
So I have another question. If you want to port an existing React app, let's say you have a Node backend and you have a React front end, is it wise to use, like, there are these tools, all these kind of frameworks on top, like React Native Web? I don't know if you know that. Is it does it make sense to use that from the beginning if you know already, okay, this is going to be at some point probably an app, or will it not make like any big difference?
Okay, yeah, great question. And I've been in that situation a couple of times lately. So you have basically 3 platforms at the moment, which is, and a bit more, but 3 main platforms, which is web, desktop, and mobile, iOS and Android. And for all of these 3, there's solutions with JavaScript. The web is React, classical React, let's say. Desktop is Electron, and then you can whatever you want inside, so also React. And then there is React Native. And then the thing you're talking about is, like, you want to have some kind of code sharing, and it is possible, but it's not really easy to do. It definitely makes the transition easier to go from React to React Native. The structure is very similar, and the way of doing things is very similar. If you have a lot of experience, you can do it, but at first, like, just do your normal web app and then try to do it on mobile, or try to do it on Electron, and work your way through. One thing, though, where it can make a lot of sense is the state management. So we saw a really simple example for state. There's tools like Redux or MobX, which handle your state, because that can get messy as well. And there it's a bit easier to move that from your normal React app to a React Native app, right? So all of your business logic in the front end, you can move that around a bit easier if you prepare that a little bit in the beginning.
Okay, if you use Redux, basically it's easier to port?
Yes, it definitely makes it easier. I personally use MobX, which I find better, but Redux is definitely like the most popular at the moment, and with these tools, it is easier to port them.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, Serge, I know you did some React development. Do you have any experience in porting?
With porting the apps?
I asked, yeah, it was a question to attendant, actually, to Sergey.
Ah, okay, sorry.
Hi, Lukas. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was interesting to hear that. But as for me, actually, I didn't work with React Native yet. I'm looking towards the progressive applications technology. It actually makes sense to add your website to home screen as an application and use offline support for that application with your web services and so on. So I think we are about near the point when web will take over again and will be used on mobile more. We had similar situation with Adobe Flash. Everybody used it. It was main framework for building rich experiences, and then HTML5 went out and Flash is gone now. I think it's starting to happen actually to native applications, and many of them can be actually web applications, and only some performance critical specific applications need to be native. So that's what I think, and that's why I'm looking towards the progressive web applications.
Okay, so basically, you're saying, yeah, you don't need really, in the future, you won't need so many adjustments to port something to mobile.
I think for a lot of cases, web makes sense because you can build only one application, then manage one application, then add it to home screen to users, send them push notifications and so on. It's those technologies are actually there here already, and we can use them. So I think it makes sense. But however, we must say that there are also performance critical situations when you work with some video graphics and so on, and you need native code. But actually, that's not about React Native. That's about C.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I think you have difficulties accessing the device. The device options, like I think you cannot use the camera or the mic so easily as if it's in a native app, you know, and other sensors, GPS and so on. I think it works, but not as great, the UX and so on.
I actually have no experience, rich experience with that, but I think not every application need a camera, and
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. For basic applications, yes. For basic CRUD applications, you don't need.
Actually, that's about websites to go on mobile. Like, let's say you are a business owner, you invest in your technology, and actually you want to reduce your costs and produce one solution which works and serves your clients on the web and on mobile. It makes sense. But I'm not saying that you don't need native experience. Sure, there are cases when you target to mobile platform and you need mobile technology to be used. But personally, for me, I think I need at least devote some time to learning what progressive technology offers at the moment.
All right. Okay, thanks, Serge. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, then I would say we wrap this up. Thanks again for everyone attending, and I will share this session in the next days in our channels. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Okay, perfect. See you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Lukas. Bye-bye.